Hello everyone, welcome to this event, Inclusion and Access in the Publishing Industry, and thank you for coming. We're really excited to see you all today, and we're delighted to introduce both of our guest speakers for today's event, Aki Schultz from the Literary Consultancy and Fraser Hutchinson from Creative Access. Personally, I know how difficult it can be to break into the publishing industry and to get your first entry role in the sector, and it can feel like everyone has a similar background. And it can feel really quite disheartening when you meet other people who seem to have this huge network of contacts and they seem to always be one step ahead of you, knowing more information. So I hope that today we can offer all of you who are looking to break into the industry some advice, whatever your background is, but we're especially hoping to offer practical support to individuals from underrepresented groups in the publishing sector, such as people from ethnic minority backgrounds, people with disabilities, or people with long-term health conditions, or people from lower socioeconomic backgrounds. However, having said that, even if you don't come from one of these groups, I hope that you'll still learn something from this webinar. And I think that Creative Access, the Literary Consultancy, and the #BookJobTransparency campaign are amazing resources to anyone who's interested in a career in publishing, whatever their background. And I also hope that this event will be informative to anyone already working in publishing who wants to make the sector more inclusive in the future for future applicants. The structure of this event will be 3 presentations, one from myself about the Society of Young Publishers, one from Fraser about Creative Access, and one from Aki about the Literary Consultancy. Following this, we'll ask all of you to submit questions for us to answer. I'm aware that this may be the first SYP event that many of you attended, so I would like to just take a few minutes to introduce the SYP. The Society of Young Publishers represents anyone in their first 10 years of their career in the publishing industry, as well as any other related industry. We also represent anyone looking to get started in a career in publishing or any other related industry. We have committees in Oxford, the North, the Southwest, Scotland, and Ireland. And all of these committees organise speaker events and social events to help members learn about the industry and to meet other people in similar positions to themselves. At the moment, many of these events are being run virtually, so keep an eye on the SYP's regional branches and their social media accounts to see if they have any upcoming events which might be of interest to you. The SYP also publishes a quarterly publishing magazine in print for its members, and the Oxford branch of the SYP has its own podcast, which is now shared across SYP branches to offer the community more regular content. Every year, the Society of Young Publishers organises a mentorship scheme for anyone who is at the start of their career in publishing or anyone trying to break into the industry. Usually, our mentorship scheme runs in the autumn, and we would be very excited for anyone in this call to sign up. As such, I would advise all of you to sign up to the Oxford newsletter by following the link which is on the screen. In November, the Society of Young Publishers will host its annual conference in Oxford, so please keep your eyes peeled for more information on that close to the time. But you don't have to wait until November, as we have more SYP events coming up next month. We have a book club, which will be hosted as a collaboration between SYP Oxford and SYP North. We have another event on the 26th of May, but I think it's time that I hand over to my colleague Liza to talk about that event, as she is in charge. So if you're ready, Liza.
Hi guys, nice to meet you all and thank you all for joining us tonight. So what we're trying to do over the course of this year is show you everything that is a part of this wonderful publishing industry. Most people only really know what editors do. So what we want to do is show you everything else. So we're going to be showing you what rights executives do, what salespeople do, what contracts people do. And we're actually going to start next month with the agents. So we have Juliet Mushins and Soleil Edwards from Mushins Entertainment, who I have to say, I do work for them. They're great. And we represent a lot of great authors. And so we're going to talk to you about how to get into agenting, what we do, and what skills you need to get into it, and how you can grow as an agent if that's a career that you are very excited about. So please come and join us, and we hope to see you there. Back to you, Andrew.
Okay, so just finally, I would say you can find SYP Oxford and all of the other regional branches for the SYP on Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, and YouTube. YouTube is particularly relevant because we upload all of our previous events. So there's a whole wealth of knowledge on there for you to find and help you get into help you start your careers. So yes, that's the gist of it. I'm now going to find the right screen with Fraser's presentation.
Thank you. Basically, thank you so much for the opportunity to speak with you this evening. I really admire SYP. I've used SYP Oxford. I live in Oxford many times, so I really appreciate the opportunity. My name's Fraser. I am head of partnerships at Creative Access. And essentially what my job entails, I work to bring in new employer partners, bring in new publishers for Creative Access to work with. And then to kind of deepen those publishers' relationships and to try and do more with them and to make those relationships as effective as they can be and as diverse and inclusive as possible. Our mission and vision at Creative Access, as it says on the screen just there, it's to work hard to see a day when the UK's creative industries truly reflect our society, and a significant proportion of that, a significant part of our work revolves around making the creative industry as accessible and as inclusive as possible. And then the next slides. So yeah, a bit of background, a bit of context, just in case people haven't come across Creative Access as yet. So we've been running for around 10 years now. Initially, we were government funded, and that government funding was all around getting underrepresented individuals into the creative industries. And as of maybe sort of 4 or 5 years ago, we now operate as a social enterprise, a not-for-profit social enterprise. So everything we do, all the money we make goes back into the running of our organization, goes back into the kind of supporting of our candidates. And we're still fundamentally, we work to help underrepresented individuals and underrepresented groups get into the creative industries, so get into publishing in this instance. But it's more than that. It's about helping them thrive and develop and essentially kind of move up the ladder as quickly as possible so that we genuinely change the face of the creative industries for the better. We work across the whole of the creative industries, or the whole of the creative economies more broadly, and that's from big household names like BBC, ITV, Google, Penguin Random House, the National Theatre, to lots of smaller organisations, smaller local organisations. And we work across the whole of the UK. So yeah, it's not just kind of very London Southeast centric. We work across the whole of the UK, and we also work across the whole of the creative economies as well. So obviously publishing, but then also kind of journalism and film and TV and galleries and museums and kind of everything in between, really. And that breadth of knowledge, the fact that we work across the whole of the creative industries, is really good for 2 reasons. One, in terms of transferable skills, so the skill set of our candidates, we're able to kind of maneuver and transfer across different areas and across different sectors. But also, and I think fundamentally, the fact that we have that kind of 360 view of the creative industries means that we have a kind of an oversight of best practice and understandings when it comes to our employer partners. So particularly in the kind of diversity and inclusion space. So if there's something that's working particularly well, or a campaign that's working particularly well in journalism, for instance, we can bring that into the publishing sphere, and we can bring that into the publishing sector, and we can really kind of start talking about that and starting to do campaign work around those issues. And just on the slide, as I say, just an example of some of the partners that we work for. And then if we move on to the next slide. And we do a great deal in the publishing space in particular. So my background is publishing. I was marketing predominantly for about 10 to 15 years, and I'd come across Creative Access a number of times, and I would very highly spoken about in the publishing sector. So I kind of jumped up the opportunity to work for Creative Access. And we work with a range of publishers, from consumer publishers through to academic publishers, from small local independent publishers to large international publishing houses and literary agencies and everything in between. And I'm sure you'll recognize a number of the logos on the slide there. And then move on to the next slide. So I've mentioned before, our mission is really to help individuals from all groups that are underrepresented to enter and to thrive in the creative industries. And as part of that, we broadly ask our employer partners, and we broadly ask those publishers that we work with to ensure that all three elements of what we call our charter are adhered to. So we want basically we want D&I to be wholehearted as possible. We don't want it to be a kind of checkbox exercise. We want it, as it says there, to be more than words. So when we work with a publisher, or when I speak to a publisher, I essentially ask three things of them. One, that they hire diverse talent, or at least they widen the pool from which they draw their talent. Secondly, to really invest in that talent. So there's so much kind of anecdotal or empirical evidence of people entering into the creative industry, entering into publishing, but then just leaving because they feel marginalized, they feel undersupported. And we really, really want to support you if you're from an underrepresented background, and to help you kind of thrive within your workplace. And then thirdly, we ask of our employer partners, of our publishers, that they help create a culture which allows diverse talent to flourish. And we do a lot around that in terms of training and consultancy, and a lot of like leadership advice on how to engage with D&I across publishing. And we at Creative Access broadly work across all three of those areas. So we're a recruiter, we're a job board, and I recommend having a look at our job boards. We run a number of support programs for underrepresented individuals, and as I say, we do a lot of kind of training and consultancy. But our partnerships with publishers, they tend to be quite bespoke, or they can be quite bespoke. And because of that, I would recommend keeping an eye on our website and our social media and on our news pages to see the opportunities that are arising for underrepresented groups. So an example being, recently we did a big piece of work with Penguin Random House, where a significant proportion of their senior leadership are now mentoring underrepresented individuals as part of a kind of whole company organization. So things like that do pop up. And as I say, I would recommend kind of keeping an eye on the Creative Access site just to see as and when they arrive. And then the next slide. And yeah, these are just some headline stats. So over the past 10 years, we've worked to place nearly 2,000 interns from underrepresented communities, and we're working with more employer partners than ever. And I think that's because the creative industries, and because publishers more generally, are increasingly engaging with questions around diversity and inclusion. So we're working with them on that as they start to kind of forge that course. And I think it's important to say that those interns that we place, a lot of those interns do then go on to get full-time roles and full-time employment, either at the company where they've interned or a related company. So it's a very successful program. And that final number there, the 50,000 people given employability skills. So we run regular CV clinics, and we run regular cover letter writing clinics. So just helping you kind of craft your CVs and your cover letters, particularly for publishers. So just go onto the Creative Access website to find out more about when they're running and how they're run, or just drop me a line. I think my email address is on the last slide. So yeah, please do get in contact. And then the next slide. So there's a really brilliant blog post on our website which accompanies this slides, and it's been written by our CEO Josie. It's called How to Create an Inclusive Workplace, and it was written, I think it was written at the kind of height of the pandemic, and it was written precisely because we're aware that people from underrepresented backgrounds have been and continue to be more disproportionately affected by recent events, and we wanted to kind of acknowledge and tackle that. And we know that now more than ever there's a need for diverse voices, diverse individuals to be heard and to be amplified, particularly as we go through this pandemic and come out the other side. So this best practice slide, this is what we ask of our employer partners and of our publishers that we work with, but I'd also similarly ask for you to recommend advocating this with your employers and with your future employers and your future publishers as well. So to take each of those items in turn, benchmarking. So this is all around publishers knowing their data or publishers knowing your data. I mean, your organizations, your publishers can't improve if they don't know where they are and they don't know where they're starting from. So we recommend that publishers do benchmarking. And as part of that, they can, see, are there patterns to who is included and who's being left behind? Where are their weaknesses? Where are their gaps? And it allows publishers to really figure out what they're doing and what they're not doing, and ways in which they can start to kind of tackle those issues. In terms of setting goals, so that's around kind of setting diversity targets and goals. I mean, publishers need to be transparent about what change they and yourselves, want in order to achieve and in order to be, good in the D&I space. But they also need to set KPIs. They need to say, over what time period will these goals be achieved, and how will they be held accountable to setting those goals that they've set themselves. So we recommend that publishers, amongst other things, set regular review meetings to see what their goals are and how they are in terms of how they are meeting those goals. In terms of surveying a team, I mean, this again, we ask publishers to regularly survey staff. Ask every person at your organization, ask every person in your publisher how you feel they are doing. Conduct regular anonymous surveys, determine where there are shortcomings and respond to that feedback, respond to employee feedback, sorry. Because gaining kind of insight from employees directly will allow you to kind of figure out how to kind of improve things, and that is a crucial step to diversity. And then the fourth bullet point there about actively recruiting, so that's something we work hard with at Creative Access. So that's about positively recruiting from underrepresented groups. So we ask publishers to really kind of change their hiring practices so that they actively recruit from underrepresented communities, and that they're not just recruiting in their own images. They're not just kind of recruiting like for like, they're not hiring by word of mouth. And so we ask them to advertise opportunities across a range of platforms, and that will include Creative Access, but we also want other platforms to be used that really kind of showcase underrepresented talent, just to enable a broader range of candidates who will be really fantastic in their roles, but they're never going to get those pool of individuals if they don't recruit in a different manner. Being transparent, obviously that's really, really critical in terms of diversity inclusion. I think publishers need to show that they're taking action, and part of that is often creating a diversity and inclusion steering group, discussing the challenges and discussing the solutions, and holding publishers accountable for their targets, and ensuring that momentum is really kind of continued and maintained over time. In terms of mentoring staff, the penultimate bullet there, I mean, that's around progressing existing staff from underrepresented communities and really kind of investing in those employees. Invest in your team, support and support their retention, support progression of underrepresented individuals, encourage staff forums and encourage support structure and opportunities such as sponsorship and mentoring from Creative Access, but other organizations as well, to really invest in those individuals. And then finally, just keep diversity on the agenda. We continually ask that of our publisher partners, become and continue to be culturally aware and continue to keep diversity and inclusion on the agenda, even when it's not a hot topic or it's not kind of in the media. Just continue to engage with D&I. Workers from all backgrounds, no matter where they come from, should feel comfortable in their workplace and should be able to access those workplaces as well. And, it's a small thing, but, recognizing and celebrating particular days in the calendar to make every team member feel seen and feel included. And as I say, kind of keeping diversity and inclusion on the agenda. And then the next slide. And finally, and I'm conscious of time as well, I just wanted to kind of highlight a few individuals. I think there's 3 here who I thought it'd be good for you to meet and to showcase a few people who've gone on to do really, really exciting things via our positive action intern program, but also their amazing skills and their own amazing kind of insights and their own amazing expertise. I won't read each of these slides out, but I think this has been recorded, and I'm very, very happy to share the slides afterwards. But I think this quote from Sahina really kind of sets the tone, where she says, honestly and truly, if it wasn't for creative access and helping me land my first internship, my subsequent roles would have been a thing of dreams rather than reality. And I think that kind of underlines it. We really, really want to support individuals through those internship programs and beyond. And then the next slide. Clarissa. So Clarissa's gone on to do amazing things, as I'm sure you've heard about Clarissa. She initially interned at PRH, Penguin Random House, and there was no role for her when she was doing her internship, but they created one for her. They saw her kind of, they saw her spark and her drive and her expertise when she was doing that internship. And as a result of that, they created a role for her. And that's gone on to pay huge dividends for her and for PRH. And I think she's, multi-award winning now. She's doing absolutely brilliantly. And then the next slide. And again, Nikki, she's an incredibly smart and sharp woman who she initially took an internship at Aitken Alexander Associates, I think it was. And Aitken, they advertise in a number of places, and they advertise on Guardian Jobs, and I think they got about 400 applications from Guardian Jobs. But we worked really, really hard to curate a list of underrepresented individuals for Aitken. I think we sent 4 or 5 over, and Nikki was one of those, and she got the job, and we're really, really proud of her and everything that she's achieved. And then final slide. And I think that's it from me, I think. But yeah, please do stay in contact. Obviously, there are all our social media tags there. That's my direct email address. And please do kind of stay in touch. We do genuinely, across creative access, we want to change the face, or help, obviously, to change the face of the creative industries and help to change the face and the makeup of the publishing sector. And we want it to be as diverse and inclusive as possible. And we really, really want to support you and others from kind of underrepresented communities. So yeah, that's it from me. Thank you.
Thank you very much for that, Fraser. Aki, would you like to share your screen and start your presentation?
Absolutely. Yes, so hi everyone. My name is Aki Schultz. I am the director of Literary Consultancy. Big fan of the SYP also. I'm aware that we do have a Q&A function in this webinar. At the bottom of your screen, you will see a Q&A button. Please do use that button if you have any questions. We're going to try and finish on time. So I am going to whiz through these slides and attempt to hide my self-view so that I can actually see them. So here we go, and I will audio describe any slides that pop up for anybody who needs it. So this is a little talk, a whistle-stop tour through inclusivity and access, and what they mean to me and to us at the Literary Consultancy. We are the UK's longest running editing consultancy for writers. So you'll notice we're not in the publishing industry proper. We're kind of both publishing adjacent and publishing agnostic, but that also puts us in quite a good position, I think, to talk about general inclusive culture in the industry. And a lot of what we do is try to create an inclusive culture for writers coming up in the industry. So we offer 3 core services. Those are on screen with little buttons. They are editorial services, our mentoring, and our events program. The editorial service does what it says on the tin. It's editing in all its forms, because we believe in the value of professional, honest feedback, and we think that can be transformative. Mentoring is the longer term, more intensive work that we do with writers over a 12 to 18-month period. And our events program covers everything from kind of a big Get a Job in Publishing conference that we ran a few years ago, to other kinds of conferences, panels, and interdisciplinary events. We also run the Quality Writing for All campaign, which looks specifically at serving underrepresented and systemically marginalised and oppressed voices in publishing. Our mission and vision: every writer deserves a good editor, even if it can be a short, sharp shock treatment, and every story deserves a platform. We're interested in how cultivating creativity and resilience can help writers to really flourish by giving them the resources to articulate what success means to them. And I think on your job journey and your career journey, understanding what success means to you, not just what you think the industry tells you success ought to look like, is very important. Just a few of our success stories, and I say that sort of in inverted commas here. On screen is a series of book covers, and I will read some of them out. These are just a few of the clients that we've had who've gone on to be published and win lucrative publishing deals. However, I see our success stories as including people like Penny Pepper, who wrote this incredible disability punk rock memoir, First in the World Somewhere, that we helped place with a publisher. Faika Mansab, This House of Clay and Water, a wonderful Pakistani writer. Harmless Like You by the wonderful Rowan Hussein Buchanan, who originally came through us. A mother-daughter team, Perdita and Honor Cargill, who wrote about a young girl going to casting auditions, and that turned into Waiting for Callback, which was published by Simon & Schuster, and everything in between. So we've helped hundreds of writers get published, but I also think that some of the successes that we're proudest of are kind of people who've gone on to finish writing a book and put it away, burn it, do whatever they want with it, feel liberated, feel like they have done what they want to do with their creativity and their story writing and their writing in general, because all writing, I think, is valid, and helping writers find their voice is what we do. So the Quality Writing for All campaign, which is really where we intersect with this idea of creating inclusive culture, is an Arts Council funded campaign that we run with 17 partners across England. So we work nationally with literature partners to give platform to and give training to and support to low income and otherwise marginalised writers. So just a few stats here on screen. Since 2018, which was the beginning of our last funding run, we've supported 611 low-income and marginalised writers across England. 275 writers have been granted bursaries through our regional writing partners with TLC to help them with their writing. 336 writers have been given free access to our events, and that it also includes over 100 aspiring editors who we've helped train up and feed into the publishing industry, several of whom are now freelancing professionally for publishers. About 40% of our activity is on a bursary basis thanks to our funding, and about 20% of our editing is on a bursary basis. I wanted to talk about how this campaign has shaped what we think of as inclusive culture, and this is something I use in a lot of talks. It comes from Shape Arts, who are one of our partners who we work with and who offer a fantastic disability specific consultancy and work and do incredible things, so please do check them out. They work on the social model of disability, which I translate to the social model of inclusivity, because I think we could learn from this model in understanding how we work and create inclusive culture. I'll read it for anybody who might be visually impaired, because there is a quote on the screen. The quote reads, "The social model holds that a person isn't disabled because of their impairment, health condition, or the ways in which they may differ from what is commonly considered the medical norm in this case. Rather, it is the physical and attitudinal barriers in society, prejudice, lack of access adjustments, and systemic exclusion that disable people. To say that someone is just different or differently abled ignores the fact that they face these disabling barriers created by society, and implies that they do not experience discrimination, and that society doesn't need to change to become more accessible and inclusive." So this model I find extremely useful in talking and in our consultancy work, and thinking about how we make culture as inclusive as possible. Part of that is my work with the Book Job Transparency campaign. It's a hashtag on Twitter, and it's also got a website, bookjobtransparency.com. I set it up in 2017 because I realised that under a quarter of job ads for the UK publishing industry included a salary, and that was across trade, academic and business. Since then, things have changed significantly. This year, both Penguin Random House and Hachette have declared salary transparency across the board to be rolled out from this year onwards. Some have made more progress than others in that field, but this is one small practical change of a system, as in that social model for the social model for inclusivity. It's system changes that need to happen, and the onus is on those systems and the people running those systems, whether they be corporate, institutional or otherwise. These are small practical changes we can make which will have long-term impacts on culture, and this is one of them, and this is why I campaign so hard for this. So today, what are we talking about? Why are we talking about it? We're talking about inclusive culture, so I'll touch a little bit on what I think that is. We're talking about transparency, which Fraser has already mentioned, and the importance of accountability. And at the end, I'm going to just do a little interactive something with you all on something I call the literary manifesto. Don't worry, I will explain in a moment. So, inclusive culture. We can talk about this in the Q&A. Please do pop things in the Q&A, do ask questions. What we've learned at TLC is the value of these 4 things, and that they're very similar, in fact, to what Fraser was mentioning earlier. We've learned the value of expertise and partnership. Collaborate with others, understand your own jurisdiction, your own areas of influence, and where you don't have the expertise or where others are doing the work. How do you uplift those people already doing things? And how do we ensure we don't keep reinventing the wheel so that we can drive the bloody machine? This is really important. We've also learned the importance of dialogue. As Fraser said, surveying, it's not just some strange corporate tool. You need to be in conversation with people about what they need and require to thrive and flourish, not just to enter into an industry, but to continue to exist in that industry and be the best versions of themselves they can. You need to be in dialogue. Frameworks, clear frameworks with clear targets, clear metrics, things you're working towards. And culture is active, not passive. It needs constant measuring, constant evaluation. It shifts and turns and changes, and we need to respond. Transparency, it's pretty obvious, isn't it? That the more transparent we are, the more inclusive our culture becomes, because people trust us. People trust the brands who they feel they know intimately, like a friend or a partner. We have that kind of connection, we crave that sort of connection, and we need it to feel valued within the place where we're working, and that's extremely important. So if we trust our employees, they in turn will trust us. And then finally, a literary manifesto. I created a literary manifesto a couple of years ago and shared it at a university talk. And these were the tenets of my literary manifesto. What can I do to actively ensure that I am part of building inclusive culture, not just talking about it? And these are my 5. Transparency, accountability, understanding where you are accountable for something as somebody in a higher position versus whether you are personally responsible for something. I think this is a really important thing to understand. This is also about challenging systems. When you challenge a system, if somebody wants to feel personally hurt by that, it's really important to look past the noise of someone being angry and to understand if there is a system change you can put in place to make them feel more valued. Curiosity is my 3rd, collaboration and creativity. So what I'm going to do now, because I do want us to have time for questions, just very quickly before I finish, I've got, and this is something that the SYP will be sharing with you all. I am going to attempt, gosh, Andrew, this is where it all goes horribly wrong. I'm going to attempt to share a little interactive poll that I would like everybody to take part in. Can we see this? Yes, okay. So on your screens, you will see a little URL here, www.menti.com. Please use your telephone, your smartphone, or your laptop, go to www.menti.com, type in the code, and I'm asking you this question. So I talked about how my tenets were transparency, collaboration, accountability, and two others that I now can't remember. If you go to menti.com and use this code, you will be asked to enter 5 words that you feel belong to your literary manifesto. I'm going to give you just 30 seconds to please enter your 5. And now this, I'll give you a slightly longer, I'll give you 1 minute for this. What does inclusive culture look like for you? So this is just one thing that you write in. It's a free text box you'll see. What would make you feel safe and welcome and valued as an employee working in publishing? These are all anonymous. These are all anonymous. What is it? Just one thing for you. Brilliant, I can see all your results coming in. That's fantastic. And that's it.
Okay, thank you. That was a really great presentation. We've got some questions coming in already, so I think maybe we should address those before it gets too late. So the first question that we have is the first question from an anonymous attendee is, I do not come from an underrepresented background, but I would like to learn more about what I can do to help inclusivity and diversity in the industry. What are the best places to get information from? And as a full-time publishing employee, what can I bring to my workplace? So Fraser, would you like to answer this one?
Yeah, I mean, I would say the Creative Access website. Yeah, I mean, we do work really hard to kind of amplify issues around diversity and inclusion. And I think, as I said in my presentation, our CEO wrote a blog about inclusivity in the workplace, but we also very happily, advocate and amplify different organizations that are working around diversity and inclusion. So yeah, that would be my first recommendation, which is to follow us on social, follow on the website, keep an eye on the blog, and we do, as I say, signpost other organizations as well.
Yeah, and it's also about, seeing what committees are currently or already exist in your workplace. Again, it's about recognizing what work has been done before, so you're not reinventing the wheel. If there's anybody active in your publishing house who has a history of advocating for something, see what you can join, what you can learn from, what you can join in as an observer and what you can join as an activist, because I think those are two slightly different things. And remember, each employee will bring with them different passions. I've got a salary transparency passion, somebody else will have a disability activism passion, somebody else will have something around ethnic minority, inclusion and representation. So it's understanding that you're best placed to help most and activate most in the area that you're most passionate about, but you can also learn from other areas.
Okay, thank you. So the next question that we're going to answer is from Jay. Jay says, I'm disabled and I can't keep up with the timescales placed on me. How do I explain that to those in the professional writing sphere and ask for reasonable adjustments?
Can I chip in
Yes,
first? Is that all right, Fraser?
Just
because we've been talking about this recently at work. So what you can do is have a chat with whoever the relevant person is. So firstly, your line manager, think about what the escalation procedure is in your workplace, whether it's straight to HR or whether it's your line manager or whether it's committee. Each workplace will have slightly different processes of escalation. And have a conversation about whether they currently provide access documents for employees or whether they would be happy to accommodate them. We have recently introduced access documents. Again, Shape Arts has a fantastic website page on access documents, what they are, how to create them. And the key here is reasonable adjustments. So each employer will have different ways that they can help and parameters within which they can operate, things that they are able to provide and things that they aren't able to provide. So an access document gives you the space in your own words to describe which adjustments for which areas are needed. Those might be how we correspond with you, those might be how you are in a physical space, and those might be things like response times when you need to be online. And they can then look at whether it's a policy they need to bring in around flexi time, compressed hours, staggered hours, or whether it's something that they need to do that's more bespoke to you. But having some kind of access document allows you to do that in a parametered way so that it's also not overwhelming for you, and that you're not just, an employer saying, tell us what you need, is actually not very helpful. An employer saying, these are the areas we're working in, what things in each of these areas would be useful to you?
And I don't have anything further to add to that. I think that's fantastic and very incorporated.
But Andrew, would you like to answer this? Because I know this is something you're really passionate about.
Yeah, I would like to have some comments on disability and reasonable adjustments. Personally, I have a disability. It's a long-term health condition, and I'm always a bit unsure about when I should declare this to an employer, how early in the application process. I was wondering if we could speak about that a little bit. Another attendee has asked a question about giving information about your disability to Creative Access when you sign up for a scheme on Creative Access. Sort of, what advice would you give to people about when they should declare their disability, and at what stage do you think it's appropriate? And if you declare to Creative Access, I think it's important just to mention you're not actually declaring to the employer the exact nature of the disability yet when you sign up. So I wanted to just bring in that question as well here.
Yeah, I mean, shall I just mention about the kind of the signing up on Creative Access specifically? So, I mean, we do, as I said, we work with publishers on recruitment, and we broadly do three things. One, we do a job boards, which I mentioned. Secondly, we do bespoke recruitment, and then thirdly, we do, I think I mentioned a few times when I talk about intern recruitment or trainee recruitment. And if it's a job on the open market, you can't discriminate. No one can discriminate positively or negatively. It has to be open for all. But if it's a trainee contract and if it's an intern contract specifically, then under equality law, which I think has been mentioned, and under kind of positive and affirmative action, then it can be ring fenced for people from underrepresented groups, of which disability is one of those underrepresented groups. And so we ask for that information so that we can determine eligibility for those internships. That's the only reason we ask it, and it's self-declared. It just means that you are eligible for those internships, and therefore we could put you forward for those. That's the reason behind that. I mean, in terms of when you declare disabilities, I mean, I think it's not necessarily I think we need to be honest, it's not necessarily a straightforward. It's fairly nuanced, and it will be different for different people in different times, and it depends how open you are about it, how much you want to talk about, how much you don't want to talk about it. It will be, I don't want to give a categorical kind of black and white answer. I mean, I was talking to our recruitment director about this earlier, and I think it's, it is fine to declare it, even in covering letters or CV letters, if you're comfortable with that, if you feel that's appropriate. But I wouldn't necessarily make that all about you. I wouldn't be the cover letter all about that disability necessarily. If you want to declare it, if you want to say that, great. But then I would focus on, but this is why I'm amazing for this role, or this is why I'm amazing for this role. I happen to have a disability, but I'm incredible. I've worked really hard. I'm really passionate about your organization. I've got all these skills and expertise, and if you want to declare it, great. But it is focusing on the application and making sure that the employer knows how brilliant you'll be in that role. I don't know.
Yeah, and remembering that you are enshrined in employment law, certain characteristics are protected, and therefore you are not, an employer is not able to discriminate against you on grounds of any kind of health issues that you might have, including mental health and physical disability. You're also not obliged to disclose any health issues until the point that a job offer is made. So this is also one of the things that I talk about a lot, which is understand your employment rights and understand the contract that you're signing and what kinds of policies are in place within the HR framework of that particular employer. So ask those questions early on and be really clear about what you are obliged to disclose and what you have no obligation to disclose. And also think about the different functions of your CV and your covering letter. Your covering letter can be where you say, because of this area of marginalisation, I have a particular interest in this bit, and this is relevant to this role because I'm wanting to develop these skills further, or this is an area that I'm interested in and it's really relevant to this particular job. Your CV, probably not. You'll have a little, I quite advocate for a personal profile right at the top, just a little section that tells the employer a little bit about you to catch their eye. You might say something in there about a particular area of marginalisation that is of interest or that you belong to. Again, you don't need to disclose that. And also remember, there are different kinds of CVs. I really like a functional CV, not a chronological CV, which just means you prioritise your skills and achievements. And that regardless of CV gaps or particular things that you're not able to do or haven't done, you focus first on the most relevant skills and transferable skills.
Yeah, that's a really good answer. I really like that answer because I think a lot of people do worry about gaps and things in their CVs, and when you've had time out for all sorts of reasons, or a more difficult time, it's really good to have these alternative solutions to get around that. I'm also really glad that you touched on mental health there, because a lot of people with mental health conditions don't necessarily realize that it counts as a disability in law. As long as it's a condition that you've had for at least a year, which affects you on a daily basis, it's protected as a disability. So you may have something like an eating disorder or a common mental health condition like depression or anxiety. And as long as it is diagnosed and affecting you on a daily basis a lot, then you have the same protection as anyone else. An anxiety attack is, it has a significant effect on you on a daily basis, even though it's common. So if you're not sure if you're eligible, do look into these things and inquire, definitely, because I think a lot more people are eligible for these schemes than they realize, especially with invisible illnesses as well.
Yeah, we've got a few kind of helpful FAQ documents about eligibility on our website, but then also the I don't have it to hand, but again I'll circulate it afterwards. The the Government Equalities Office have the Equality Act obviously, but then they've got lots of helpful information about eligibility and positive action and recruitment, all those kind of things. So I'll send a few links afterwards as well. So
for the next question, we have an attendee saying, I'm really interested to hear what you as professionals in the industry think the future of publishing will look like in terms of training programs, graduate schemes, mentoring programs.
Great question. A lot of this will be, where do you think creative access will be? And hopefully the answer is, with any luck, obsolete, because we would like to be in a position, or have pivoted to looking at kind of continuing to promote inclusive culture and ensuring that people progress to senior leadership positions. So that was a brilliant part of Fraser's presentation, talking about retention. We talk about, there's a lot of entry-level schemes. The focus is so heavily on entry-level, but actually there are career changers coming in mid-level who feel really out of their depth and unsure about where to apply, at what level to apply, what to expect, who have huge transferable skills and are massively underserved. There are older people who, again, feel like they've just got no chance of getting in. Should they be applying for an entry-level role, even though they've got 50 years of stuff behind them? So I'm hoping that the shift will be not away from, but to include other than just entry-level, looking at retention. And yeah, fewer diversity panels that just talk about diversity and more platforming publishers, writers, publicists, editors, marketing people, storytellers, videographers, etc., from a genuinely as diverse a range as possible. I remember we had an event years ago with an incredible author talking about his writing practice, And he said, we ran this event in, I think, July or August, and he said it was the first event in that year that he was invited to talk about his writing and not about being a Black author. And I just think that's an atrocity. Fraser, what are your hopes of the future?
Yeah, I mean, I just completely agree with you. Yeah, I mean, we're kind of broadening out our training to kind of those kind of different levels. So not just kind of about entry level, but about those kind of people with kind of middle management or senior management, just how to develop and support those individuals, and yeah, get them up to kind of board level and changing the board of the creative industries to make them more kind of represented. Yeah, nothing further from me.
Okay, thank you, Fraser. I'm conscious of the fact that you have to leave at 7. We have 4 more questions, so we could either type out answers or we could, I don't know. I'm happy to keep answering them on my own if necessary.
I'm happy to stay on. I've got, Fraser, are there any in there that you particularly want to answer? That might be a good way round to do it, that you really want to address.
No, not particularly. The one that's just in front of me at the moment is from Saskia about the working from home. And yeah, it's just yeah, I guess that's kind of interesting because it's been in the kind of industry press at the moment about kind of working from home policies and people being more flexible and more, adaptive. And it's pertinent for me because I mean, I grew up in Yorkshire and I just had to move south. I had to move to kind of Oxford. I had to move to London to get a job in publishing, and that just changed my life trajectory. And I'm aware that other people necessarily wouldn't have been in a position to do that. So the fact that publishers are moving to a hybrid model and more kind of working from home, this really, really excites me. And I think, I think Bonnier and maybe Hachette have recently been in the bookseller and things about changing it to 2 days in the office and 3 days in the office. It's a very kind of open conversation at the moment. And it is it's a shifting culture. And there's obviously like a legal obligation to ask for flexible working, and employers need to be open to the conversation about flexible working. But yeah, I mean, I'm really excited that things are moving to a hybrid model. I mean, the honest truth is that I think that employers will probably ask for you to be in the office at some point. I think that you'll be probably hard pushed to find a job where you can work from home the entirety. Not that those jobs don't exist, but they're just not that, they don't come up that often. I think we need to kind of be realistic about that. I mean, we certainly, on the creative access side of things, always ask when we're placing a job advert to say whether it's work from home or whether it's in the office and what the flexibility can be. So it's about that transparency, and it's about that openness of what the role entails. Yeah, I'm rambling a little bit. I'm kind of excited by the fact that things are moving into a hybrid model, but I don't think it will move entirely to work from home. I think those jobs will be few and far between.
I agree, and I think that's partly because the publishing industry moves at a glacial pace, and change is often promised and then not necessarily delivered. But I also think for something Fraser mentioned there, which is really important, is there is a legal obligation for employers to consider a request for flexible working where you have been working for 26 weeks consecutively for the employer. So if you are a contracted worker, check your contract. If there's no kind of flexible working policy, is there one in the HR folder? If you need a change of contract to change the way that you work. So if you do wish to ask for flexible working, you need to raise a formal request. The employer then has up to 3 months to respond to that request, and they must declare why, if they refuse it, why they have refused it, and you have access to a tribunal. So again, this is where you need to know your employment rights and need to know where you can and can't ask what and in what ways, and who to have that conversation with at your workplace. So that's really important. And there are lots of flexible ways of working. There are job shares, part-time hours, compressed hours, staggered hours, and flexi-time policies. So I think all of those should be made available, but again, whether they will be, I'm not sure. And we as employers the most we can do, and if you're working in-house, please be transparent about what is on offer, and please don't be transparent about what's not on offer. So we recently introduced an accessibility note for each of our events, including what we can and what we can't do for each one. I was really anxious because I thought, my God, why are we telling people what we can't do? But it's been easier for people to assess which they can attend, which they'd feel more comfortable in. And it's been a much better way for us to work around our events program.
This leads quite nicely on to some of the other questions, so I will just have this as an add-on. For people who are maybe applying for roles which are currently remote because of coronavirus, but are worried they won't be able to relocate because of disability, how would that work if maybe you're applying for a role and you're not an employee yet, but you think you can't relocate for reasons of disability?
I think you need to then think about what you want to declare. If it's advertised as remote for the time being and you're applying for it, I would be really transparent in the application process, and or give them a call or find the person who is in HR or the person who's named in the job ad as the point of contact and ask them and say, I'm really interested in applying for this role. I'd be really interested to hear whether you would consider somebody for eventual remote working. This is why. And that's where I think you do probably need to declare and just be aware that you're doing that in a confidential way, and they won't be able to discriminate on that basis, but they might be able to say, well, actually this isn't a post that is suited to that, and therefore we wouldn't encourage you to take the time to do that application, because it takes a lot of time to make an application, a good application. So do ask ahead of time. I think it gets trickier when you haven't asked, and then you're building up anxiety within yourself, and the employer's in quite a difficult situation if they haven't been told. So do feel like you can have that conversation with them.
Okay. Fraser, are you needing to leave now?
I've got toddler responsibility, so I've got one eye on the clock, I'm afraid. But thank you so much for the opportunity. And I think I've said, I'll forward multiple things, so I'll rewatch the recording and see what I said I'd send and send it.
Okay, thank you. Thank you so much for everything. Aki, we've got 3 questions.
Yeah, I'm sticking around for the final questions with the survivors. Okay. See you, Fraser. Lovely to see you.
Thank you. Bye. So this one's quite relevant to you. What kind of surveys to start a dialogue in publishing can be helpful?
It is relevant to me because the Book Job Transparency campaign has a survey. The reason the survey has been delayed is that from a data collection and aggregation perspective, collecting data on how people are feeling about applying to jobs in publishing during a pandemic is likely to skew the data. And so actually, I didn't feel like it was a representative time to get the survey out. The survey is ready. It has also been surveyed by the SYP, who have been one of my consulting partners. And we've got 2 surveys, one for publishing hopefuls, because I think we need to compare what people applying into the industry feel, and there's one for people working in-house. So any surveys done within an ethical framework, I think the Google Docs circulating with kind of everyone's pay are fantastic, but they shouldn't be seen as sort of official surveys. They're a great benchmark. They're a fantastic tool for people wanting to have a sneak peek. They're not sort of scientific data sets. There's also a problem with people being identifiable via open documents circulating. I just think there's a sort of note of caution. There's also the Book Careers Survey, which has been running for many, many years and has inspired me, which is also into salaries in publishing. And Kat Mitchell recently has released a survey, which I believe is closed now, which focuses on disability in publishing. But if you think of any that you want to launch yourself, by all means do. The only thing I'd say is really make sure that you've covered data ethics as part of that, to make sure that you're really doing it properly.
The next question is, what kind of reasonable adjustments can you ask for during an interview? I'm dyslexic and have mental health struggles which make interviews intimidating. Often I end up stumbling over my words.
So again here, if the employer doesn't have an access document that they've made readily available, you can request one, and you can also create your own, and you can say, these are the requirements. I think at what stage do you do this? Probably once you've been offered an interview, you might wish to contact the appropriate person and declare any particular things and say, are there any accommodations for a phone rather than interview, or video rather than phone, or whatever it might be, your preferred method. Mostly there should be. Recently I was on a recruitment panel where somebody asked for the questions in advance. We did not feel it would give them an unfair advantage, and there were no sort of surprise or trick questions. So it was possible to give them questions 1 week in advance or 1 day in advance, depending on what you're asking and what level the role is. So do ask. Probably good to have in your mind what might be useful for you, so that you can minimize the kind of back and forth. So if you already know, I would prefer to send a video in, I would prefer to have a phone call in the morning or in the evening because of my energy levels or whatever that might be, do declare that, yeah.
Okay, so I would just like to add something for this. This charity isn't associated with the Society of Young Publishers or probably Creative Access or the Literary Consultancy. But there's a charity, Employability, and I'm putting a link to their website in the chat. They're a really good charity. You register with them, and when you apply for a job, they will advocate on your behalf with the employer. So you tell them about your disability, and then they get in touch with you, and they help you to think about what adjustments you need. And they will contact the employer on your behalf saying, we have a candidate that has applied for this job. They have these requirements. How can we work with you to make the process more accessible for the candidate? So I would check them out and see if they could help you specifically. And
final question, Andrew.
Final
and
question.
thank you to our survivors who are hanging in there by the skin of your teeth. We are over soon.
Are there any other areas of recruitment that you would like to put under the microscope? I've been surprised over my career about the lack of formality in the interview process, especially in less corporate areas of publishing. For example, the tendency for adverts to close ahead of deadlines.
Yeah, adverts closing ahead of deadlines is a tricky one, because I think it is unfair, and really it's about probably volume of applications and the employer having the discretion to close early. If that's the case and you're worried about the volume of submissions, my advice would be you'll have to take a punt at a shorter time frame. And if you don't get as many applications, you can extend it. So really, I think the onus is on the employer to make the adjustments rather than the poor applicants who are probably planning their applications. That is a bad system. That is a bad kind of, yeah, like I was saying, this is all systemic. That's a system change that needs to happen. And that's not from the applicant. That can't come from the applicant. Other areas of recruitment, I mean, obviously the salary transparency thing for me is huge. General transparency and kind of thinking about language that we use in job adverts. Sometimes things that feel very natural to us may be completely opaque to somebody coming in from outside of the industry or who's never worked in the industry. I'm not sure about kind of formality of interview process. I think formality of assessing applicants, having a really robust structure for, a proper scoring matrix, with the idea that all of those robust systems make it fairer and make the process smoother. So less kind of making it a more formal process as an interview, and more having robust measures in place to ensure that everybody is assessed fairly. Hopefully that makes sense. And then beyond that, things like things that have come up. So Book Talk Transparency also has a kind of contact page, and things that have come up through there are once you're in publishing, not really understanding how to escalate things, and not being very clear who you go to if you have a particular grievance or issue. That could be much clearer. So proper organograms, really clear, accessible kind of outlets for people, resources for people to help them with their mental health. If you have employee assistance programs, they're chronically underused. Do you have one? How do you use it? Who do you go to? Where's the link? What's the password? And then things like pay reviews. So if you're promised a pay review and you're promised, I'm shocked at how many people have told me they are told they'll get appraisals and they never happen. And this should be a kind of 6 monthly and yearly thing. All of that, again, it's just about accountability and measuring, so that your employees, not that they feel watched and monitored, but so that they feel that you're listening and that you're keeping an eye on them and you're aware of any issues that crop up. Hopefully that has answered the question. Okay,
and that's it. Thank you so much, Aki. Thank you for sticking around a bit longer.
No problem.
Thank you, and thank you for everyone for attending.
Thank you.
Okay, bye.
Bye.